Welcome back to ROC Movie Reviews again.
Yes, once again. We're going to say it every time. Every time. Yes, so we are back, and we are talking about another horror film. But this time we're talking about the follow-up to our last film we reviewed, Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, a horror masterpiece. We're talking today about the, 3 decades or almost 4 decades in the making sequel, also based on the book by Stephen King.
Oh, yeah.
Dr. Sleep.
Hi. You can hear me. You're magic. Like me.
I don't know about magic. I always called it The Shining. The world is a hungry place. A dangerous place.
These people, they hurt people like us.
These empty devils, they'll eat what shines. And they've noticed that little girl.
Well, hi there.
Get out of my head! Get out!
I haven't felt power like that in so long.
They're coming. Where are we going?
There's a place. You sure you want to do this?
I'm ready.
Yes, you run, dear. And then I will find you, and you will scream for years.
Come and play with us forever and ever.
And I believe, if I'm correct, I believe the book also came out like nearly 4 decades after the book of The Shining as well.
The book definitely came out a lot later, just like the movie did.
2013, I believe.
Yes. So prior to knowing this film was coming out, I had always heard about The Shining, but when it was finally coming out, I think it's when the first trailer for Dr. Sleep debuted,
Yeah.
that it finally got my attention. I was like, I gotta watch The Shining, because not only was the trailer so friggin' good, but when I learned that Mike Flanagan was on board for it, I was like, okay, yep, because if you don't know, huge fan of Mike Flanagan, the Ouija sequel, Origin of Evil. He saved that franchise.
Thank God.
Yes. Hush on Netflix, excellent. Gerald's Game, another Stephen King-based movie, phenomenal, genuinely phenomenal. Before I Wake, another Netflix horror film he did, which is pretty underrated in my opinion. And his directorial debut, technically his mainstream directorial debut, Oculus.
Wow.
He is great at what he does, and I have to mention, before we get into it, I have to mention his magnum opus horror show, The Haunting of Hill House.
Wow.
Which, side note, the second season or the follow-up show to that, The Haunting of Bly Manor, is coming out this October on Netflix. So it'll be a follow-up to that The Haunting of Hill House season.
Wow.
Yes.
Cool.
So this guy's just been hit after hit after hit. I think I touched on every film he's done, if not most of them. He just understands what makes horror movies scary.
Oh, yeah.
And after watching Oculus, because I think that was one of my first films I saw by him, oh man, that was a trip. That was a serious... Have you seen Oculus?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was alright.
For many reasons, it heavily affected me, and especially the ending. I was just like, mouth was wide open.
Yeah.
So obviously he just knows his way around the horror genre. I love that he's staying in the horror genre because the genre needs it.
Oh yeah.
Besides James Wan and Jordan Peele and Ari Aster, Mike Flanagan is still a very highly underrated director in the horror genre. And I'm glad he's finally getting way more credit because it's like everything he touches like turns to gold, or at least turns to like bronze or silver. I know it's a cliche to say it. He has not made a bad film. His actual directorial debut that wasn't mainstream was a film called Absentia, which I have not seen yet, but everything else that he's done, I have seen.
Cool.
Right?
Yeah.
So, with that down and out of the way, we're talking about the follow-up to Kubrick's The Shining and Stephen King's The Shining. Mike Flanagan comes on. He's got Stephen King's blessing because Stephen King was pretty involved in the production of the movie and all of that. So right there it was like, oh wow, that's interesting, because Andy Muschietti, director of It Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, also got Stephen King's blessing.
Wow.
Because Stephen King genuinely loved both films he did.
Yeah.
So to impress Stephen King, or to be accepted, your film to be accepted by one of the greatest horror writers of all time.
Yeah.
It's a pretty big deal. Pretty big deal.
Yeah.
So, this, like you said, years following the events of The Shining, 1980, a now adult Dan Torrance must protect a young girl with similar powers from a cult known as the True Knot, who prey on children with powers to remain immortal.
Yep.
This is a very different film from The Shining.
Yeah.
I think the fact that it came out so much later than The Shining also plays to that.
Yeah.
But I was okay with a different story because it looked unique, it looked interesting, and I love Ewan McGregor as an actor. Favorite film of the decade was The Impossible. He was the lead in it.
Oh, yeah.
He just has done such a good job of picking different roles. Just, I think this past year or last year, he played the villain in Birds of Prey. He's got some real range as an actor.
Oh, yeah.
And it's great seeing him play all these different types of roles. And I don't know, this wasn't as much of a stretch as, say, his villain in Birds of Prey, but it was really interesting to see him take on the role of the kid from The Shining, and to see him play a adult version of that. And I think, for the most part, he really nailed it.
Oh, yeah,
He did a great job. It was a very thought-provoking and sensitive and layered performance.
Yeah.
And with that said, we're gonna just jump into the cast. Ewan McGregor, I think, is genuinely great.
Oh, yeah.
In this movie,
Definitely.
so good. The main villain, an actress I've been very familiar with for a couple years now, at least, Rebecca Ferguson.
She's the woman with the top hat.
Rose the Hat.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think this is the only movie I've seen where she plays a villain, but wow, was she good?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, she's good in every film I've seen, but her playing the villain was like, okay, alright, I'm digging this. She was very sinister. She just played the character so well, and she's the leader of this cult, the True Knot.
Yeah.
So I think she did a very, very good job. We talked about child performances in the first Shining, and how Danny Lloyd was so good as the kid.
And how normally they could be like one of the two extremes.
Yep. The girl in this movie, played by Kylie Curran.
I thought she also did a good job too.
Yeah, she really surprised me. Like, I was expecting not nearly as good of a performance as we got.
Yeah.
And I think her chemistry with Ewan McGregor was really sweet. I understood it. I liked that they teamed up, like I would say, about midway through the movie, for the same cause. Yeah. And the fact that she also has the same power as him. She has the Shining.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's what they call it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have a totally different story that follows a character from the original, but it's very different in the way it executes and its story is told.
Oh, yeah.
But I was okay with that because I wanted something fresh. I wanted something new. Yeah. And I think for the most part, I got that. Actually, the third act of this movie is the only part that really feels like it's a direct sequel to The Shining.
Yeah.
The first two acts feel like a totally different movie, which is fine. Totally fine. Yeah. And it felt appropriate that it was so far removed from the first Shining because it felt more original.
Yeah.
So, it sounds like you kind of want to say something about that? Okay, fine, go ahead.
Which, I feel like because I didn't relate to Shining as much, I didn't really know what was happening in the film.
You were a little bit thrown.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, it doesn't. I don't think everyone loved this movie. I think some people genuinely did not.
Yeah.
But I
Didn't
think
it get like average RT scores?
I think it got 70, I think 70 something, 70,
Alright.
60 or 70, which is again above average.
Yeah.
And critical reception was overall it was fairly positive. There was some
Yeah.
negative, but I wouldn't say it was split down the middle.
No.
So, we're still in cast. The only other person, I guess, or people worth mentioning, Cliff Curtis, character actor, been in a ton of stuff, plays Dan's friend, longtime friend, Billy Freeman. I guess in the book he actually doesn't die. But in the movie he does.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
sad. And I saw this movie in the theaters with my aunt. She had read the book, I hadn't, so I was actually able to get a different perspective from my own, where she said, I didn't like that they killed him in the movie and that he actually is alive in the book.
Yeah.
So the movie does deviate a little bit. And I think Mike Flanagan had a really gargantuan task of not only satisfying fans of Kubrick's film, because Stephen King didn't like it, but also satisfying fans of the book.
Yeah.
So satisfying fans of Stephen King, and then satisfying fans of Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah.
That sounds like a really arduous task.
Yeah. It really does.
But I think if anybody could have done it, it was Flanagan. I think he did a really good job.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he just puts so much time and work into the characters and into the story. He thinks about everything in a scene, and I just love that. I think the only other person worth mentioning is Emily Allen Lind as Snakebite Andy. I've seen her in a couple of other horror films after this, but she was good. She was the first girl that Rose kind of not possessed, but gave her the power or something.
Yeah.
Kind of turned her, so to speak. Yeah. And she was very menacing, and she was in the movie a good portion. I didn't really know what they were doing with her character at first, and then I was like, ooh, that's what they're doing with her. It was interesting, albeit disturbing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so great job from her as well. But again, it's a very small cast.
Yeah.
You really only have 1, 2, 3. Un, deux, trois.
Just like The Shining.
Yes, which is an interesting comparison. When I saw the movie, I didn't really relate it to that.
Yeah.
I was like, there really are only 3.
Except I feel like this cast was like a little bigger than The Shining was.
Yes, I
because
think
there was more side characters.
there was. I agree 100%. I should mention that Carl Lumley played Halloran, who was killed in the first.
Yeah.
It was a different actor, but Dan sees him as a vision, as a ghost in The Shining, and how he explains to him how he can kind of lock the spirits away in his mind. Remember in those chests? That idea was really cool to me. I think they did a good job of executing on that later on in the film.
Oh yeah.
That shot where he lets them all out and they basically, well, they kill her, don't they? They just like mess her up. I don't even remember exactly what happens. But then they start to possess him, and he starts chasing her through the mansion or through the hotel. And that was obviously, that third act is for the Shining fans, and I really enjoyed it. The recreation of certain scenes, down to the shot.
Oh yeah.
When Rose is walking towards Danny, or no. Yeah, she's walking towards Danny, and Danny's got the bat this time.
Yep.
It was such a nice subversion of that original scene from the first Shining.
Definitely.
And I just thought it was clever without ripping off the original Shining.
Yeah.
So, that was the last person worth mentioning, I think. Henry Thomas played that bartender who plays Dan's dad. He's supposed to play Dan's dad, but he's dead. This actor was also in The Haunting of Hill House. Really good actor. I love that Mike Flanagan worked with him again, just in a small little scene in this movie.
Oh,
it was a nice little tidbit for Flanagan fans.
Definitely.
Okay, so that being said, I think we mentioned the runtime of The Shining, and if we didn't, it's like a 2-hour and 40-minute movie or something?
Yeah, it's like, I think roughly the same time as the first Shining, I would say.
Yeah, it's actually, I have it right here, it's 2 hours and 32 minutes.
Oh, it's longer.
It is longer than the first Shining, but I didn't mind the runtime of this at all. I was thoroughly invested in the characters. By the time the third act came around, I was fully locked in.
Yeah.
And even though this movie ends differently than the book, because my aunt told me it does, I liked the way the movie ended for the most part. I think I
Yeah.
had a couple issues with it, and certain people died
Yeah.
that I wish hadn't.
Same.
But overall, I think it's a successful follow-up to a all-time great horror film.
Yeah.
It was never
To
going to
an
be able
extent.
to be on the same level because it just
Nah.
that's just too high of a bar to clear.
Oh yeah.
And maybe if Kubrick had actually directed Doctor Sleep, maybe if he was still around and wasn't
Yeah.
dead, possibly. But if you change it and you have a different director, if you have a totally different storyline, you don't expect it to
Yeah.
meet that level.
Paths they're gonna be drawn you won't like. And
But
pretty much.
as a whole and as its own story and as a movie separately from The Shining, I think it works very, very well, and it still left me pretty darn satisfied.
Oh yeah.
So, that's just me. The cinematography, I believe it's a longtime collaborator of Flanagan. Let's see, who did the cinematography? Michael Fimonari. No, I actually don't know this guy. Although, like I thought,
Yeah.
cinematography for Haunting a Hill House. Oh wow, Gerald's Game, Ouija, Origin of Evil, Before I Wake, Hush. There we go.
Yeah.
Frequent collaborator of Flanagan. His films always look great.
Yeah.
There's a certain aesthetic to every Flanagan film that just it's such a clear picture, and the colors and the hues and the tones used in the movie just normally they fit the emotional beats
Oh
of
yeah.
the movie.
Definitely.
Great stuff. I want to talk about a scene in Doctor Sleep for 1 second. The one where the red rum gets like etched
Yeah.
into the wall, and then doesn't he like the? It's kind of like the attic where he's in. Doesn't it go like kind of vertical and he starts to fall into the wall?
Kind of does.
That was cool.
Yeah.
That was really, really cool. One of the most memorable scenes from this movie. There's a good number of memorable scenes from this movie, but I have
Yeah.
to say, I think that kind of tops all of them
Yeah, definitely.
for me. And I love the last shot with the naked lady in the tub.
Yeah.
I can't believe they
Again.
brought her back, and I might have been even more disturbed by it this time than in the original Shining.
Wow.
I'm not sure because the effects are better,
Yeah.
and it felt all the more detailed. And I was
I
like,
mean, it's
oh.
not as bad as the lady in it chapter 2, but
Oh, you mean Mrs. Kirsch?
yeah.
Yeah, no, that's she's the stuff of nightmares.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'll gladly take the naked lady in the bathtub from The Shining over Mrs. Kirsch.
Yeah.
Mrs. Kirsch. Oh, Jesus, every time I say her name.
Yeah.
Ugh.
She almost reminds me of Margaret from Resident Evil Biohazard.
Yes. And she was terrifying.
Yeah.
I mean, oh god, Marguerite. Yeah, Marguerite. What's her last name? What was the family's last name? And the Bakers, the Baker
Bakers,
family. Oh boy, that's a separate thing. We should totally review Resident Evil 7, the
Yeah.
game, in a separate
After we
review.
play it.
Yeah, that's true. We haven't played
Yeah.
it, but we've watched playthroughs of the entire thing, and we know about it. It's been out for years, so.
Oh, yeah.
But hey, Resident Evil Village or Resident Evil 8 is coming out at the beginning of next
Yes.
year, so.
Anyways, so we're talking about Doctor
Yeah, we're
Sleep.
talking about Doctor Sleep. Sorry, getting off on a tangent.
Yeah.
Original music. I know who this was by. I believe frequent collaborator with the Flanagan of the Mike. Of Mike Flanagan, the Newton brothers. Great score. They scored all of his other stuff as well.
Yeah.
And this is probably one of my favorite musical scores of theirs.
I agree.
But they have so many good ones. Like I don't think any of theirs are mediocre at all. They're good to really great. So that's where they range. That's it. It's a very different movie from the original Shining, but I really do recommend it. I think it's worth a watch. Not everybody will enjoy it. Like you said, your score is going to be lower than mine, but I really enjoyed my theater-going experience with it. And I'm sure more Stephen King fans will find it out if they haven't already, because it did, the recognition for it was pretty high when it came out.
Yeah.
I mean, 30 years later, a sequel to The Shining, it's going to get people's attention.
Yeah.
So, and even the fact that the movie recreated the twin scene, kind of.
Yeah.
You remember that? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it pays homage to the first Shining in the last half. And I feel like even fans who didn't enjoy the movie that much will say, oh, that last half was great.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So, 8 out of 10 from me for Dr. Sleep.
Wow. I am actually a little lower. I'm gonna say 6.
Yeah, I had a feeling it'd be a bit lower. Again, not a perfect film. I do have issues with it. A couple here and there, a few. But I think the positives outweigh the negatives, and for a film that was going to follow up one of the greatest horror films of all time, I think it was as good as it could have been.
Yeah.
You know?
Pretty much.
Enough said. That's our review of Dr. Sleep. Thank you so much for joining and listening to us. As usual, my usual outro, we will be back very soon to talk about another film or a game.
Yeah.
We don't know. We genuinely don't know which it'll be yet. So look forward to another episode very soon. And until then, we'll talk to you guys soon.
Alrighty. See you.
Oh.